Good morning from the Prado Museum. We're here before opening to the public to have our weekly sessions in English supported by the American Friends of the Prado Museum. Thank you so much to our donors for making programs like this possible. We encourage you to take a look at our organization as well as our sister organization, Fundación Amigos del Museo del Prado, to see what we do and how you can get involved. I'm very excited to show you this work of art here today. We have the Holy Trinity by El Greco. This was an altarpiece painted in the mid-16th century in Toledo, which is a city 75 kilometers south of Madrid. This work of art is an amazing example of El Greco's work, but also tells us a story about Spanish history as well as a little story about his career. Now, El Greco is not the actual name of this artist. El Greco translates in Italian to mean the Greek, and his full name was Dominicus Theotokopoulos. He was born in Crete in 1541, and at this time, Crete was part of the Venetian Empire. So they had a lot of influence and connection to Italy, but additionally, a couple centuries earlier, it was part of the Byzantine Empire. Now, Crete at this time was very important sort of artistic center for Greece, and the work that was happening there had a strong Byzantine influence. We're talking very flat portraiture, a lot of gold leaf, a lot of strong outlines on the forms. Now, El Greco was a superstar in Crete at the time, and he was painting there at a pretty young age until he was around 26 years old. At that time, he moved to Venice, where he was interested in learning more about the Venetian style. While there in Venice, he had influences like Titian, who's another superstar Italian portraitist of the time. We have some of Titian's work here in the Prado Museum as well. Now, El Greco is spending his time learning about the styles there in Venice, but additionally, he took an opportunity to travel around Italy to learn about the different styles. One of the styles that he was eventually exposed to was the Roman Mannerist style, which is one that we see most exemplified in this painting here. So during his time in Rome, El Greco was getting influenced by the painters working there at the time, but he also met an important character, our friend Luis de Castilla. Later, this patron would be really important in the story of him arriving to Spain. Now, I think it's important to talk a little bit about what was happening in Spain in the mid-16th century while El Greco was spending time in Italy exploring and developing his craft. So at the time, in Spain, we had the Habsburg king, Felipe II, who had recently moved the capital of Spain, the Spanish Empire, from Toledo to Madrid. So before that, Madrid wasn't a very big or important city, so Felipe II was really interested in developing the city, making it into that important European capital and the most important city in his empire. Part of this construction included the development of El Escorial. El Escorial was a monastery and palace that was built on the outskirts of Madrid, about 45 kilometers north, and this space was developed to be a palace and a monastery of large proportion. Now, the development of this new building meant that it needed to be decorated, and so you had artists coming from all over Europe interested in getting some of those commissions, getting into the interests of the royal family, and so at that time you had a lot of artists coming from all over Europe. And this is precisely when El Greco also comes to Spain. Now, this work of art that we're looking at today is actually the first commission that he received when he arrived in Spain. It was for the convent of Santo Domingo el Antiguo, which was a convent, as I said, in Toledo. He received this commission from Luis de Castilla, whose father was in charge of the convent at the time. Now, I want to spend a little time looking at this beautiful work of art. This would have been the very top part of the altarpiece. and way up high on the wall. There were three other paintings which are included in the altarpiece. One that would be immediately below, which is the Assumption of the Virgin, and then two on the sides, one which was a depiction of the resurrection, and the other which was the Adoration of the Shepherds. Now, in this work of art, we see in the center Jesus, the Son, who has recently died. He has risen to the heavens, and he is being held by the Holy Father, who is seated on a throne in the clouds. Above him, we see the dove, which is the symbol of the Holy Spirit, engulfed in this golden, bright light coming from above. Around the Holy Trinity, we see the faces and bodies of angels and cherubs, which are helping to frame the image for us. Now, keeping in mind that this work of art would have been placed high, high up on the wall, when we look at the composition, we can notice that there's a large chunk of clouds at the bottom, which would have appeared much more foreshortened when seen from below. Additionally, the bright light around the Holy Spirit, when seen from below, would have appeared much larger, creating more balance in the composition. Now, interesting about this work of art is that the composition itself is borrowed. It's coming from another artist who was working earlier in Germany. Now, this artist is Albrecht Dürer. He was a printmaker at the time, and he was creating this image of the Holy Trinity in this exact setup. Now, interestingly enough, about 100 years earlier, printmaking was becoming popular and a new innovation, making it possible for artists like Albrecht Dürer to share his work more widely. It would have been impossible for El Greco to be traveling around Europe, gaining access to seeing the works of art of his predecessors and contemporaries. Now, there's another work of art in our collection that has a really similar composition that also borrows from this same work of art by Albrecht Dürer. We have another Holy Trinity right here by José de Ribera, which utilizes the same composition. We have the Son who has recently died. He's risen up to the heavens. He's being supported by the Holy Father. And we see the same Holy Spirit symbolized by the dove accompanying them both. Now, of course, Ribera makes his own sort of adjustments to the composition, but it's really interesting to see the impact of having these printed images that both artists would have had access to in order to create their own take on the Holy Trinity. José de Ribera has almost an opposite trajectory of El Greco, which is very interesting. He's a Spanish artist born outside of Valencia, who then made his move to Italy to continue his career and live the rest of his life. Now, returning to our Holy Trinity, El Greco, we see color as one of the most primary and important elements of this work of art. We see these bright, jewel tone colors, which are, are hallmarks of the Roman Mannerist style that El Greco would have picked up during his time in Rome. And El Greco is using contrast, putting color on all sides of the painting except for the body of Jesus. Jesus' body is painted almost in a monochrome, really highlighting his lifelessness, the sacrifice that has just transpired. Another important hallmark of a Roman Mannerist style that El Greco really utilizes beautifully is his treatment of the human form. Jesus' body is depicted in almost an S shape, really highlighting its lifelessness. But also, El Greco is really taking time to show us the musculature of his body and the almost impossible angles on his hand and wrist. He's giving us light coming from the lower left hand and left side of the canvas, which really highlights the body of Jesus, but almost obscures his face. It's about his body, it's about his lifelessness, it's about the sacrifice that he's depicting and the unification of this Holy Trinity. It's a really beautiful reminder of this punctuation mark in the career of El Greco, and I think it's a wonderful depiction of this work of art, telling a larger story about his life and career. Thank you so much for joining me today. We look forward to seeing you next week for our next session in English.